On the outskirts of a tiny, forgotten town, barely a speck on the map, lived a young man named Andrew. Every night he promised himself he would start over, clean up the house, throw out the empty bottles, bring some order to the grey dullness of his daily life. But by morning, those intentions slipped through his fingers like water. His job on the ranch drained him of every ounce of strength, and by nightfall he'd come home with a bottle of cheap bourbon, drink it in one gulp and collapse on the bed. That vicious cycle had been repeating for over a year, ever since Delilah left him to try her luck in the city. He'd met Delilah by chance at a local dance. She was electric, full of life, impossible to look away from. For Andrew, who was used to routine and silence, her laughter was like a breath of fresh air. Before her, Andrew lived alone. His grandmother, who had raised him since he was a boy, passed away just after he came of age, as if she had been waiting for him to be able to fend for himself. No one thought he'd come back to the countryside after finishing school, but he did. He built a solid home and worked so hard, even the older men respected him. He was the best machine operator in the whole area. He could make any old tractor or harvester roar like new. At first, he didn't pay attention to the girls. He believed he had to get his life in order before even thinking about starting a family. He remembered too clearly the hardships of childhood, those freezing nights in a drafty shack, his grandmother rationing firewood, food always scarce. That's why, when Delilah appeared, his dreams finally took shape. A warm home, a family, children who would never lack the things he had once gone without. Delilah was the eldest of many siblings, tired of bearing so many responsibilities. To her, Andrew was a real gentleman. They married without extravagance, but with love. Andrew showered her with attention, with gifts that in their town were little more than dreams, and he never asked her to stay tied to the stove or the chickens. But happiness didn't last long. After 3 years, Delilah began to feel smothered by rural life. "Andrew," she said one day, shifting from foot to foot, "how long are we going to stay here? Everyone's moving to the city, making progress, living. And us? I don't want to rot out here in the fields." Andrew stared at her, not understanding. "But you were happy. We have a house, work, animals. I'll install running water soon. It'll be like an apartment in the city." She sighed, pacing as if something invisible was pulling her. "And the theaters, the coffee shops, the people," she snapped, throwing her hands up. "You're not listening to me." That night they had their first real fight. Andrew lost his temper, insulted her, slammed the door and stormed out. Later they made up, but the tension stayed. 3 weeks later, Delilah vanished. He came home from work to find a note. She'd met someone else, someone who understood her and had left with him to the city. She'd even taken the money Andrew had been saving for their future, claiming it was compensation for her best years. From that day on, Andrew changed. He sold his animals, let the house fall into disrepair, and sought comfort in the bottle. At first he thought he'd bounce back, but little by little, even his friends began to distance themselves. His boss had already given him a warning about showing up to work with bourbon on his breath. One morning, as he got ready to leave, he looked around at the wreck his house had become. "Today, I'll clean it," he said to himself sadly. He stepped outside into a cold that bit through his coat. The sun hadn't even begun to rise yet. He headed toward the barns to start up the tractor when he heard a low voice. "Excuse me." Andrew jumped. In front of him stood a young woman with a child. Her scarf covered half her face, and her eyes looked tired and full of worry. "What are you two doing out here in this cold?" he asked. "I'm sorry," she repeated, shifting from foot to foot. "We're looking for a place to stay the night. My son is freezing, and we have no money." The boy, no older than 5, clung to her side, hiding his face. Andrew felt a pang of compassion. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his keys. "Well, go to my house," he said. "I'll be back this evening. The heater's ready. Just turn it on. You might find something to eat. Better if you stay indoors. Folks around here talk." The woman stared at him, a mix of shock and gratitude on her face. She took the keys and thanked him. Andrew just nodded and went on his way, not thinking much of the fact that he'd just handed his home to complete strangers. He, who hadn't trusted anyone since Delilah left. All day, he couldn't stop thinking about that encounter. On the way home, he picked up his usual bottle, but he also bought a bag of candy. He wasn't even sure they'd still be there, but something about the boy's shy smile had touched him. As he approached, he saw light glowing from the windows, and his heart skipped a beat. That warmth looked like the echo of something long lost. Cautiously, he peeked in and froze. The house was unrecognizable. Everything was clean, in its place. Beneath a blanket, the woman and the boy were looking at a book together. The scent of hot food lingered in the air, so familiar and yet so distant that Andrew swallowed hard. "Is this really my house?" he whispered. He stepped inside carefully. The woman stood up, flustered, adjusting the blanket like someone expecting to be scolded. The boy, still clutching the book, looked at Andrew with suspicion but didn't run. "I'm sorry," the woman said, nervous. "We cleaned a little. I made dinner. I hope that's okay." Andrew stood still, unable to speak. He, who had grown used to chaos and the bottle as his only comfort, was looking at a nearly perfect homey scene, something he thought he'd never see again. "Dinner?" he said at last. "Well, I guess I could use a bite." His stomach growled as the rich scent of beef broth filled the room. She served quickly, avoiding his eyes. The boy stayed on the couch, clutching the book. Andrew sat beside him. "Hi," he said gently. "Is your name Michael?" The boy nodded cautiously. Andrew offered him the candy. "Here, I thought you might like these." Michael looked at his mom. She hesitated, then gave him a small nod. The boy took the gift and whispered, "Thank you." The soup was steaming, fragrant with garlic and cilantro. At the first spoonful, Andrew closed his eyes in bliss. He couldn't remember the last time he'd tasted something so good. "Thank you," he said, looking at the woman. "Really. It's been a long time since I ate like this." "Thank you," she replied softly. "You didn't throw us out." "I'm Andrew." He finally introduced himself. "And you are?" "Olivia." After dinner, Andrew leaned back in his chair, wrapped in a warmth that didn't come just from the food, but from the genuine presence of those two people. He felt brave enough to ask, "So, what are you doing out here?" Olivia hesitated, then sat down across from him, hands clasped tightly. "Running," she murmured, "running from something awful." Andrew frowned. "Tell me." Olivia took a deep breath and the words spilled out, barely above a whisper. She had gone to the city for school, young and naive, and trusted a man who left her alone with a child. When she returned to her hometown, things got worse. Her mother had married a man who wanted to make Olivia his second wife. She refused. To her horror, her own mother sided with the man, threatening to take Michael away. So she fled, with nothing but the clothes on their backs. She finished her story with the teacup trembling in her hands. "So you have nowhere to go," Andrew said quietly. "For now." "No," Olivia answered. "Then stay here," he said with sudden resolve. "I hardly even live in the house anymore. You won't bother anyone. We'll figure out the rest later." She opened her mouth to protest but stayed silent. Michael stepped forward and shyly asked, "Are you gonna be my dad now?" Andrew froze, then smiled. "We'll see, champ. We'll see." Everything changed the next day. Andrew came home from work to find a clean house and a hot meal waiting for him. That night, the three of them sat at the table, and Michael spoke excitedly about his favorite stories. For the first time in months, Andrew had no desire to open a bottle. He smiled without effort, but the past doesn't let go so easily. One afternoon, as he returned home, Andrew noticed a familiar figure standing by the gate. His heart skipped. It was Delilah. She stood there with her usual air of superiority, as if no time had passed at all. "Andrew," she called, reaching out her hand. "I came back." He stared at her, a storm of emotions rising in his chest, emotions he thought were long buried. "Delilah," he said coldly, "what are you doing here?" "I came back for you," she said with a smile, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Andrew furrowed his brow. "A little late, don't you think?" "Wait, what do you mean late? Aren't you happy to see me?" "Happy," he replied, stunned. "You left me for someone else, took everything I had, and now that my life's in shambles, you come back like nothing happened." She lowered her gaze but quickly recovered. "I'm still your wife." "You were," he cut her off. "Everything's different now." Inside the house, Olivia and Michael were waiting. Andrew hesitated for a moment in front of the door, part of him not wanting to leave her alone, but another part fiercely protective of what he had begun to build. She looked at him, perhaps expecting him to melt like before, but something in him had shifted. "Andrew," she said, voice trembling, "I know I made a mistake, but we can fix this." He looked at her in silence, then took a step forward, blocking the doorway. "Fix it? You stole everything from me, money, trust, the future I had planned. And now what? You want back in because things didn't work out with your new guy?" "I told you I've changed," she stammered, no longer so confident. "It's too late," Andrew said, walking into the house and closing the door behind him with a calm that surprised even himself. His heart was pounding, but the pain, it wasn't the same. "Who was it?" Olivia asked, stepping out of the bedroom with a freshly mended sweater in her hands. "Nobody," Andrew replied, taking off his jacket. But her expression, full of quiet understanding and a hint of concern, made him speak again. "My ex. She came back. Thinks she can pick up where she left off." Olivia stood still for a few seconds, then gave a small nod. "Do you want her back?" "She doesn't belong here anymore," Andrew said with a certainty that brought him peace. Michael peeked his head out from the bedroom. "You're back," he shouted, running into Andrew's arms. "Mom and I were reading a book about knights. You have to read it with us." Andrew grinned and ruffled the boy's hair. "Of course, champ. Let's see what kind of knight I am." That night passed with a warmth that felt almost like family. Olivia with her book, Michael dozing off on her shoulder, and Andrew watching them, soul at peace. But the peace wouldn't last. The next day, a truck pulled up in front of the house. Delilah stepped out, flanked by a man in a military haircut and an expensive jacket. He had the look of someone who thought the world owed him. Andrew stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed. "Now what?" he said. "I came for what's mine," Delilah said, haughty. "And what's supposed to be yours? You, and everything you've earned." "Earned?" Andrew laughed bitterly. "You mean the things I worked myself raw for while you lived it up in the city?" The man took a step forward, chest puffed. "Watch how you talk to a lady," he warned. Andrew scoffed. "Lady? Ask her how she robs the ones who trust her." Delilah turned crimson with rage, but just then the front door opened. Olivia appeared, holding Michael's hand. Her gaze was calm, but firm. "What's going on here?" she asked. Delilah looked her over with contempt. "And who's this? Another little farm girl trying to take what doesn't belong to her." Andrew stepped protectively in front of Olivia. "Don't you dare talk to her like that." The man raised his hands, pretending to defuse the situation. "Easy, buddy. We just came to talk. She wants you back. She needs you." Andrew looked at him, then turned his eyes to Olivia and Michael, who were silently watching. "I'm already where I belong," he said, and walked back inside, shutting the door firmly behind him. He leaned against it, heart racing. "Thank you," Olivia whispered. "For what?" "For choosing us." He looked at her, and in her eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in years, sincere gratitude and quiet affection. "You two saved me," Andrew said, collapsing into a chair, "even if you didn't realize it." But Delilah wasn't done. They spent the night listening to her truck idling outside. The man shouted, demanding they come out, but Andrew never moved. Only when they finally drove off did he step outside for some fresh air. The next morning, a neighbor caught up with him on the road. "I saw the mess yesterday," she said with a mischievous smile. "You think she'll be back?" "I don't know," Andrew replied honestly. "Well, whatever happens, we've got your back," she said with a wink. It gave him a bit of relief, though he knew the situation wasn't over. That night was calmer than most. For the first time in ages, Andrew felt something close to happiness. The house that had once smelled like dust and abandonment now pulsed with life. Olivia and Michael slept soundly while he sat by the window, thinking that maybe, just maybe, life was giving him another chance. But peace can be deceiving. Around 3 in the morning, a strange smell pulled him from sleep. Acrid, penetrating. At first, he thought he was dreaming, but the smoke was real. He jumped to his feet, the air already thick and hot. "Olivia!" he shouted, running into the bedroom. She was awake, coughing, clutching Michael in her arms, both of them wide-eyed with fear. "Fire!" she cried out. "It's everywhere!" "Out the window!" Andrew ordered, touching the door and yanking his hand back. It was burning hot. Smoke swirled around them like a suffocating fog. With great effort, they climbed out into the freezing night. Flames were already licking out of the windows. Andrew ran to the shed to grab an old pump and some tools, desperate to stop the blaze. But the fire was too fast, too strong. Olivia dashed into the dark to find help while he fought against the inferno with a manual water sprayer. The fire trucks came 20 minutes later. Neighbors too, some with buckets, others with prayers. But in less than an hour, all that remained was smoldering ruins. Covered in soot, Andrew stared at the charred remnants of his home, heart shattered. Something didn't feel right. The fire had spread too quickly, too perfectly. "We're alive," Olivia said softly, holding Michael close. "That's what matters." Just then, a neighbor came running down the road. "Andrew, you're not going to believe this. Down the old road, a truck got stuck. Smells like gasoline everywhere." Andrew's heart clenched. He didn't wait for more. He ran. 2 miles away, he found Delilah cursing at her truck, kicking the tires. Around her, gas cans lay scattered, one still open. The stench of fuel mingled with the cheap perfume she always wore. "Delilah!" Andrew roared. She spun around, pale as a ghost. "Andrew, this isn't what it looks like." But just then, a police cruiser pulled up. One of the firemen stepped out. "Was it her?" he asked. Andrew didn't hesitate. It was her. His voice was ice cold. The rage was gone. All that remained was a terrible clarity. This woman would stop at nothing to get her way. They loaded her into the patrol car. She cried, screamed, made excuses. In the trunk, they found more gas cans. Her clothes reeked of fuel. Andrew watched without saying a word, feeling something strange. Peace. "It's over," he thought. He walked back to Olivia and Michael. She looked frightened, but when she saw him return, her expression softened. "What now?" she asked in a whisper. "Now we start over," Andrew said, looking at both of them. And for the first time, he knew it truly was a beginning. The next morning, Andrew stood in front of the remains of his home, burned earth, blackened walls, but he wasn't alone anymore. Soon, neighbors began to arrive, some with water, some with tools. But what struck him most were the words of Mr. James, the old sheriff of the town. "You've always been there for us, Andrew. Now it's our turn. We've all talked. We're going to rebuild your house." "You don't have to," Andrew started, but the old man cut him off with a firm clap on the back. "You don't get to decide that. The town does. We don't leave our own behind." And so they did. Within days, the work began. Some donated bricks, others labor, others cash. In a week, the foundation was already set. A month later, a new home rose from the ashes, stronger, more beautiful, built with community love. During the construction, word spread like wildfire about what Delilah had done. It turned out she owed money to dangerous people in the city. They'd threatened her. In her desperation, she came back to Andrew, hoping to sell off what little he had left. But it didn't work. She was tried and sentenced. Andrew never spoke her name again. The new house was spacious, comfortable, with every convenience one could imagine for a small town. At the housewarming, neighbors brought food, drinks, and threw an impromptu celebration. Andrew stood on the porch watching Olivia and Michael set the table, placing plates with care. That house was no longer just his. It belonged to the three of them. Later that night, as the neighbors began to head home, Olivia sank into the couch, rubbing her tired hands. Michael was fast asleep in his new room. Andrew sat beside her. "Ollie," he said softly. She turned to him with a smile. Her eyes shimmered, full of emotions she hadn't yet spoken aloud. "What is it?" "I just wanted to say thank you. Or, I don't know, maybe it's more like, thank you for letting me thank you." She placed her hand gently over his. "Thank you," she replied. "You gave us a new life." He swallowed hard. "This might sound silly, but I want you to stay, both of you, for good." She looked into his eyes, a quiet light in hers. "We're already here." Andrew took her hand. It was the most important decision of his life. As time passed, they became a family. They learned to care for each other, to trust again. They raised Michael with love, celebrated his birthdays, read to him at night, filled the house with laughter. Months later, Andrew, more nervous than a teenage boy, approached Olivia one afternoon. "Ollie, I wanted to ask you something." She looked up, curious. "Would you marry me?" Olivia froze for a moment, then smiled. "Yes, Andrew." Michael came running, having overheard them, and threw his arms around them. "Now I really have a family," he shouted with joy. And in that moment, Andrew understood that life, at last, had found its meaning. That home, those two people, that was the happiness he had always been searching for.